Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the sweltering sands of ancient Persia, where, believe it or not, people were sipping wine that had been chilled without ice, electricity, or even a fridge in sight. Picture this, a dusty horizon glowing, with sunset, domed rooftops shimmering in the dry heat, and somewhere in the maze of clay homes, a jug of cool, sweet wine just waiting. You can almost taste the pomegranate notes, can't you? Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Love knowing how far we drift together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step barefoot onto the packed earth road of an old Persian town, let's say Yazd, the desert city that somehow never forgot how to breathe. The sun's been merciless all day, toasting rooftops and curling palm fronds into dried fists. But now the sky blushes with twilight, and you can finally walk without feeling like a baked fig on a grill. The smell of sun-warmed clay, rosewater from a passing vendor, and the metallic tang of dust makes your nose twitch. You hear the soft jangle of camel bells in the distance slow, irregular, the soundtrack of people who really aren't in a hurry. That's the thing about ancient Persia. It moved at a pace dictated by sun and shadow, not by clocks or deadlines. Past a series of squat buildings with weird chimney-like structures poking out of the roofs, some wide, some slender, all slightly leaning like they've had one glass of too much Shiraz wine. These are wind catchers, or badgers if you want, to sound impressively local. You don't know it yet, but they're part of the reason wine could stay cool in a place that looked like a clay oven from Space Dot. You duck into a shaded corridor, where the air suddenly magically feels different, cooler. It's not a trick. A current of wind is being funneled through these buildings, guided by unseen hands and forgotten science. It's like nature's version of a ceiling fan, only it doesn't buzz or break down or blow. Someone's invoice papers across the room. Historians still argue whether this was purely practical or whether it carried spiritual weight. Was it just physics, or was cool air a gift from Ahura Mazda himself, a divine whisper of comfort in a punishing world? In this twilight city, there's a deep, quiet respect for wind. Not the wild gales that kick sand into your teeth, but the slow, steady kind that slips through the alley and lifts the edge of your tunic like an approving nod from the gods. Wine was a delicacy in ancient Persia made from grapes, dates, or even pomegranates, depending on the region and century. And while much of it was room temperature or warmer, the nobility had different standards. After all, if you're going to stare at stars from a marble balcony while a court poet recites verses about longing and jasmine, your goblet better be cool to the touch. So how did they pull that off? Here's the fringe tidbit of the night. They didn't just rely on wind towers. Sometimes, if they were rich enough, they'd line their underground wine cellars with fish bladders. Supposedly, it helped regulate moisture and preserve the flavor. Yeah, no one asked the fish how they felt about it, but the real trick was in harnessing nature, not overpowering it. Wind catchers pulled in air from above and pushed it downward, cooling it as it passed over water from Connaught's underground aqueducts that brought mountain spring water all the way to town. More on those tunnels later, but for now, just picture them as buried rivers humming beneath your sandals. Some wind towers even had internal veins to direct airflow, like the ancient version of those little levers on your car's AC vents. The more elite homes had ducts carved with an obsessive symmetry that would make modern engineers blink twice. And now here you are, being ushered into the stone entryway of a wealthy merchant's home. It smells like date syrup, crushed mint, and aged stone. His steward robed, aloof hands you a brass cup of wine. You touch it to your lips, cold, not icy, but shockingly refreshing. Your eyebrows rise involuntarily. The steward doesn't blink. He's seen this reaction before. The merchant chuckles from his silk-cushioned bench. "Wind," he says in Old Persian, gesturing to the tower above, "and patience." Outside, the badger moans softly, a long, low tone like the desert. Itself is exhaling. You take another sip. Your tongue tingles. Your shoulders relax. And a cat, because of course there's always a cat, slinks past your ankles, glancing back like it owns the architecture. These towers weren't just architectural gimmicks. They were survival tools, social status symbols, and, in a weird way, sound machines. Some emitted gentle hums or whistles when the wind was right. Rumor had it that the sound warned of approaching sandstorms, or that it lulled babies to sleep before the age of lullaby playlists. One theory, a bit out there but oddly compelling, is that certain homes were built to create microclimates cool. Zones in central courtyards that nurtured vines and small trees, even in harshest summers. Some modern botanists are still baffled by how pomegranate trees survived here so long, and yet, despite all this innovation, no one left blueprints. They passed knowledge, orally father to son, master to apprentice, occasionally drunk poet to confused potter. That means the towers you see in Yas today aren't exact copies. They're architectural whispers, generations deep, built on memory, intuition, and trial and error. You can almost hear them murmuring across time. So now, as the stars fully claim the sky and the city shifts to its night rhythm, you find yourself stretched out on a carpet, the wine glass empty, your toes finally cool. Somewhere, a wind tower breathes, and somewhere else, a fish probably regrets the invention of wine storage. You're basically a human grape. You've been walking under the Iranian sun for what feels like years, even though it's only been an hour and you're fairly certain. Your sweat has given up and gone on strike. Your tunic sticks to your back, your sandals are sandpapering your feet, and your tongue feels like it's been scrubbed with cinnamon. The kind of heat that makes you question your life choices, or at the very least, question why you didn't bring a second head wrap. Welcome to a summer afternoon in ancient Persia. The sun hangs overhead like a slow roasting deity, unmoving, unrelenting, and maybe just a little sadistic. The road between settlements glimmers with that ghost mirage wobble. You squint at the horizon, unsure if that's a line of day palms ahead or just another visual prank played by your heat-addled brain. You pass a goat. It's not moving. Consider asking it how it stays so calm. It blinks once. You take that as resigned acceptance of the crushing heat. Goats are wise. Now imagine living in this weather. Not just surviving it, thriving in it. Building cities, raising families, planning dinner parties. The Persians did, and they didn't just tough it out. They built systems to work with the heat, not against it. Systems that whispered, hey, maybe we don't need to sweat constantly. You trudge into the outskirts of a village. The walls are a sun-bleached beige, blending into the desert like the world's most forgettable wallpaper. But hidden in this plainness are secrets. Shadows fall long from the buildings, and even though there's no breeze, you can feel the difference. Stepping from open air into the shadow of a wall. A slight coolness, a break. Your brain almost whimpers in relief. Here's a mainstream historical fact for you. In ancient Persia, especially in desert cities like Yazd and Kashan, architects oriented streets and alleys in very specific directions to optimize shade and catch prevailing winds. Entire neighborhoods were mapped based on how they could stay marginally cooler through the worst parts of the day. They didn't have thermometers, but they sure knew what blistering felt like. You reach a small square where a few market stalls remain open despite the hour. A woman fans herself with a woven palm frond. A boy offers you a ceramic jug of water, which you accept like it's a holy relic. The water is cool, not freezing, but not warm either. You blink at the jug. Sorcery? You peer into it. Nope, just basic desert physics. You ask him where it came from. He jerks his thumb behind him toward a small domed structure beside a modest home. That's your first close-up look at the magic. AYNDCATCHER. It's not beautiful. Not really. Not in the way a golden dome is, or the way those glazed turquoise tiles shine under a setting sun, but it's clever. 4 vertical shafts, each facing a cardinal direction. Slits in the tower draw in wind, channel it downward, and push it through the house below. If there's water nearby lake, a basin, or a hidden stream, the cooling effect doubles. It's like walking into a refrigerator built by a poet with no access to electricity. Historians still argue whether these wind catchers originated here in Persia or further south in Egypt. Some say the earliest ones showed up in the 4th century BCE. Others push it earlier or credit them to Babylon. But Persia is where they truly blossomed, where badgers became a signature of home life, a mix of comfort and status symbol. You lean back against the shaded wall of the boys' house. A breeze kisses your neck, funneled down through the badger, and brushing your overheated skin like an apology. Your body relaxes. For the first time today, you stop feeling like a sun-dried apricot. Here's a delightful little fringe fact. Ancient Persians didn't just use wind towers for humans. They built miniature versions into stables and pigeon towers to keep their animals comfy. Imagine being a royal carrier pigeon flying back home. After a long day of being a feathery messenger, only to find your coop has its own personalized AC. That's VIP status for birds. As you rest, you notice that some of the homes around the square have different styles of wind catchers. Some are narrow, single-shafted, facing the direction of the strongest seasonal breeze. Others are larger, with multiple openings, designed to catch wind from anywhere. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It was a family-by-family airflow. Prescription people here understood that the wind had moods. Some days it came down from the mountains, brisk and clean. Other times it whipped across the desert, dry and heavy, carrying the ghost of faraway sands. You hear a local elder mutter, a short prayer when a gust whips her headscarf. You realize they're not just engineers of air, they're storytellers of it. You remember your earlier dehydration-induced fantasy of a tall glass of chilled pomegranate juice. It doesn't seem so far-fetched now. Not here, where physics and poetry conspire to keep things cool, even in a place that should be unbearable. By now, the heat has ebbed a little. The shadows are deeper, the air is lighter. Someone calls out from an upper balcony. A pot of stew clinks onto a windowsill. A cat stretches dramatically on the cobblestones. You're no longer a human grape, more like a slightly rehydrated raisin with just enough energy to marvel at how, in a place this hostile, someone figured out how to make wine cold. Glance up at the wind tower again, its silhouette stark against the pinking sky. It looks like a chimney for a fireplace you'll never light. You wonder how many generations lived under it. How many sat with their backs against this wall, same as you, and thank the gods or the engineers for a single breath of cool air. Your journey isn't done yet. There's more wind to chase and even colder drinks waiting in the shadows. But for now, lean back, soak it in. The desert may never love you back, but with the right architecture, it just might tolerate you. You stare up at the wind catcher, squinting against the fading sun, and the thing still looks kind of like a giant clay nose. You can't unsee it now. This building has a nose job. A really impressive one, considering it's been breathing in hot air and exhaling cool drafts since before Caesar could walk. These towers weren't just randomly slapped onto rooftops either. Each one was a carefully calibrated structure, like an organ pipe designed not for music, but for microclimates. You take a few lazy steps closer to a home with one of these wind catchers, rising above it, and the temperature dips noticeably. Your skin reacts instantly, goosebumps blooming with gratitude. The structure is tall, segmented into channels that funnel even the most reluctant breeze downward into the rooms below. And even when the air outside is still deathly still somehow, some part of the badger still manages to make it move. And here's the magic. These towers don't just suck in air. Some of them are smart enough to push hot air out as well. That's right. Ancient Persia had passive air conditioning with built-in exhaust. Your modern Havik system is sweating with envy right now. Historians still argue whether the earliest designs came purely from trial and error, or if they were based on precise understanding of airflow dynamics. There's even a theory that these structures were the result of careful, long-term observation, generations of builders watching which way the smoke blew, which walls stayed warm, and which basements stayed dry. Eventually, they figured out how to nudge air around like a polite but firm usher in a crowded theater dot. You enter one of the homes, ducking beneath a low arch and stepping onto smooth stone tiles that have been cooled all day by indirect air and deep shadows. The interior smells faintly of rosewater, dried figs, and centuries. You glance up. The wind catcher's interior shaft is open to the ceiling, a tall dark well that seems to inhale and exhale on its own. There's a quirk in design here. Some towers are divided internally with vertical fins or panels. These guide the air down, different shafts depending on wind direction. It's like a choose-your-own-dash adventure for oxygen. You wonder if ancient Persian dads ever argued over which panel to open the way modern dads fight over thermostat settings. Probably. Some things are eternal downstairs. You notice a stone channel carved into the floor, running the length of the room like a tiny canal. Water flows through it slowly, fed by a qanat somewhere beneath the city. The moving water cools the room even further, and the air coming from the wind catcher passes over it before swirling through the space. The result: a room that stays comfortable, even as the desert tries its best to roast everything alive. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some wealthier homes reportedly added crushed willow bark to their indoor water basins to give the air a slightly herbal scent. That's right, air fresheners ancient style. If Bath and Body Works sold Persian windcatcher candles, this would be the scent: damp stone, rose water, and a hint of fancy bark. Now you step into the central courtyard. Most traditional Persian homes were built around one. It's open to the sky, ringed by rooms on all sides, and centered on a small garden or fountain. At the base of the windcatcher, a pool reflects the tower's spindly silhouette. You realize the design isn't just about airflow, it's about beauty, serenity, and balance. The structure itself is practical poetry. The wind hums quietly above you, slipping through the channels, passing over water, cooling stone and skin alike. You stretch out on a thick carpet laid beside the fountain, propping your head on a tasseled cushion. Somewhere nearby, a door creaks. Someone's preparing tea black and strong, sweetened beyond reason. Even in the heat, they drink it hot. Go figure, there's a moment here, reclining in this cooled space where you feel suspended between centuries. The tower above you is older than your language, older than many modern cities, but it's still doing its job. Still catching wind, still chilling rooms. You hear it breathe above you. Long, slow breaths. You breathe with it. Oh, and here's a fringe theory for you. Some researchers think wind catchers weren't just passive structures. They may have been tuned, yes, like instruments. Variations in shaft width, shape, and fin design may have created low-frequency sound waves, audible only in certain conditions. A few badgers were even said to sing during sandstorms. A built-in desert lullaby, if you will. Of course, others call that nonsense. They say it's just the wind, a trick of the ear. But if you listen closely right now, lying beside this old pool, you might swear you hear a melody in the draft. Back outside, the neighborhood comes alive as night creeps in. Shadows stretch, lanterns flicker, and someone's oud begins to strum a slow tune. The rooftops light up with quiet conversations, the kind you have when the worst of the heat has passed and your brain can finally form thoughts again. You climb a short set of stairs to the flat roof of the house, stepping carefully around clay, pots, and drying herbs. From up here, the city is a forest of wind catchers. Some tall and rectangular, some octagonal, a few completely crumbling. They rise like spines from the backs of sleeping houses, silhouettes against the copper sky. You sit cross-legged near the edge, watching the world dim. A glass of cool wine is handed to you, deep red, almost black in this light. You take a sip. It tastes like mulberries, spice, and the kind of patience that requires several lifetimes. And just before full darkness swallows the rooftops, you catch a soft gust on your cheek, rising from below, curling through your hair. A gentle sigh from an ancient nose tower, still breathing after all these years, taught you wake well, not fully, just that half-lidded, slow breath kind of waking that happens when the air is just right. Not too hot, not too cold. The kind of air that slides across your skin like cool silk. That's how the wind moves here, late at night, across the rooftops of Persia. And up on your perch, surrounded by domes and towers, you start to wonder, who thought of this? I mean, it's one thing to stack bricks and hope for a breeze. But these wind catchers' badgers aren't improvised. They're precise, intentional. They weren't invented by accident. So, who had the nerve to try taming the desert wind? You stretch your legs, glance down at the street where shadows still cling to the corners, and drift into the story of the people who built this air. Let's start with the Zoroastrians. You've probably heard the name. Fire temples, sacred flames, dualism, a whole thing with cosmic good and evil. But in Persia, Zoroastrianism was more than religion. It was a culture of order versus chaos, light versus dark, hot versus cool. The idea of balance, asha as they called it, was everything. And that included not boiling alive in your own home god. So it makes sense that early Persian architects, many of them Zoroastrians, would treat airflow like a divine partnership. Guiding the wind into homes wasn't just about staying comfortable, it was about harmony, about aligning your living space with the forces of nature, not resisting them. Which sounds poetic until you remember that resisting nature in the Persian desert meant death by dehydration. So yes, harmony was a survival tactic. These early builders were more than just laborers. They were part scientist, part philosopher, and probably part magician if you listen to the local gossip. And their designs didn't stop at wind catchers. Some carved elaborate air channels into thick adobe walls, curving like veins, carrying breeze and scent like blood through a living body. Here's a mainstream historical fact. By the Achaemenid period around 550 BCE to 330 BCE, Persian engineers were already using architectural features to manage temperature. In palaces like Persepolis, you'll find high ceilings, strategic windows, and courtyards designed to amplify wind flow. These were not afterthoughts. They were central to the design, but wait, who built these places? That's where the story bends. Because while royal architects drew up the plans, the actual muscle came from slaves, prisoners of war, and day laborers paid in grain and shelter. They held bricks, shaped clay, and stood on sun-blasted scaffolding while someone shouted about shaft angles. Some historians argue that these workers, especially the skilled ones, were more like artisans than slaves. Others say that's just romanticizing a tough reality. The truth? Probably both. Persian society had strict hierarchies, but it also had room for talent to rise. A low-born mason with a gift for airflow might find himself working on a noble's estate within a few years. Social mobility airborne, if you will dot now. Don't picture these builders in silence. Imagine the noise, the scrape of trowels, the slap of mud, the hiss of straw being mixed into bricks. Jokes shouted between scaffolding. Probably the occasional swear when someone dropped a tool from 30 feet up. And here's a quirky tidbit. For you, some ancient builders chewed on licorice root while they worked. Not for flavor, but because it kept their mouths moist in the heat. Nature's Gatorade stick, centuries before electrolytes were trendy. The master architects, meanwhile, obsessed over angles. They built small-scale wind tunnels, yes, literal miniature wind tunnels to test different designs. Which direction should the tower face? Should the slits be narrow or wide? How do you catch the wind when it barely exists in midsummer? Questions that today would fill a dozen architecture journals were solved with clay models and a lot of squinting at the horizon. And because this is Persia, they didn't stop at function. Badgers were decorated. Carved latticework, glazed tiles, even verses of poetry etched into the stone. Form and function were soulmates here. Why build something ugly, even if it worked? One windcatcher in Yazd, still standing today, has a base. Shaped like a star, with 8 fluted shafts reaching toward the sky like the petals of a dryland flower. Each one catches a different wind. You think of it as ancient HVAC. They thought of it as art. You descend from the roof as night deepens, trailing your fingers along the rough plaster walls. You enter another home, this one grander. The front door is carved with geometric patterns. Inside, a merchant is talking with a craftsman. They argue about airflow. Should the main shaft be widened to catch the spring breeze? Should the fins be adjusted to block the autumn gusts that bring dust? Historians still debate whether wind catchers were first used in homes or in granaries. Some say they started as a way to protect food, then evolved into cooling for people. Others say the elite wanted comfortable dining rooms before they cared whether the wheat sprouted mold. No one's entirely sure, but standing here, eavesdropping on a conversation that probably happened in every neighborhood, you realize how central this technology was to life itself. It wasn't just about being fancy. It was about breathing. Later, in the courtyard of this home, a storyteller holds court. Children and elders sit cross-legged on carpets. The tale tonight is about a prince who captured the wind and kept it in a jar. He opened it only when his guests arrived, letting the breeze swirl through his banquet hall while everyone else in the city sweltered. Total wind privilege, a little girl asks. Is that what the towers do? The storyteller nods. Yes, but they're kinder. They don't trap the wind. They invite it. You lean back, your cup refilled with something cool and tart. Maybe tamarind juice, maybe magic. The stars blink above you. The wind hums content. And the builders, the philosophers, in dusty sandals still speak through their work. Every tower a testament. Every breeze a whisper. You step deeper into the home, where the walls thicken and the air gets cooler. Not just cooler, different. There's a silence here that feels layered, like you're wrapped in linen and stone. You follow a narrow staircase, its steps worn smooth by centuries of sandaled feet, and suddenly you're underground. The temperature drops another degree. You blink as your eyes adjust to the light. Oil lamps flicker softly, their flames barely moving, casting long shadows against the arched walls. The air is dense but breathable, with a crispness you wouldn't expect this far beneath the baking earth. And there it is, the heart of the system, the quiet pulse beneath the elegance of those wind towers above. The qanat. Let's back up. This word qanat is going to come up a lot. It's a simple thing with world-changing implications. An underground channel carved into rock and clay, angled gently downward from mountain springs to cities far below. A river beneath your feet, gravity-powered plumbing. Ancient Persia's version of a hey, let's just bring the water here a moment, and here's your mainstream historical fact. The canal system is one of the oldest known forms of underground irrigation, dating back over 3,000 years. It originated in Persia and eventually spread to places like North Africa, India, and even parts of Spain. If your modern city has subterranean water infrastructure, think some clever Iranians with pickaxes and a deep respect for cool drinks. This canal you're standing beside is narrow, only a couple feet wide, and the water flows silently along. Its path dark, smooth, and cold. Not cold like ice water in a mountain stream, but cold enough. Just enough to make your skin tingle when you dip a hand into it. This water has traveled dozens of miles beneath the earth, shielded from the sun. The entire way. It arrives not with fanfare, but with quiet grace. You trace its path through the room. It's been guided into a small pool set beneath a grated shaft, right where the wind from the badger pours down. This isn't a coincidence. It's an ancient collaboration. The wind meets water. The water cools the wind. The wind chills the room. And now you, reclining against a stone bench carved into the wall, sip from a clay cup filled just moments ago with wine that tastes, well, suspiciously like something from a fridge. Here's a lovely little fringe detail. Some canals were so elaborate. They had service tunnels running parallel to them, maintenance shafts for teams of workers to check for blockages and repair collapses. These men were called mokanis, and their job was part engineer, part mole person. They spent much of their lives underground, navigating by torchlight, measuring water flow by ear dot. It's said they could hear trouble in the tunnels before it started, an echo slightly off, a new whisper in the stone. Today we'd call that acoustic diagnostics. Back then they called it experience. And the homes built above these underground wonders, their basements became sardabs, literally cold places where jars of pickles, cheeses, and of course, wine were stored in the chill. Many sardabs had air shafts that opened into the canal channels themselves, pulling evaporative coolness into the room. It's the architectural equivalent of blowing across a bottle to make music, only this time. The bottle is your house. Historians still argue whether these systems were solely designed for residential comfort or if they were originally invented for food preservation and simply became luxurious over time. One camp insists the primary goal was grain storage. The other says, have you been to Yazd in July? Comfort first. Now imagine living in this world. You're a wine merchant in a city like Kerman, and it's your job to keep your precious cargo cool until the banquet 2 weeks from now. You don't have ice. You don't even have a thermometer. What you have are stone steps, clay amphorae, and a whole lot of airflow no dash held out you carry your wine jugs down into the sardab, stacking them neatly against the cooler back wall. You check the seal on each beeswax or pine resin, depending on the grape, and maybe you say a little prayer. Not to preserve the wine, but to preserve your reputation. No one wants to be that guy who served hot, spoiled pomegranate wine to a Persian noble now for something weird. There are surviving records of desert communities placing wet clay pots in front of air shafts to cool rooms even further. These acted as primitive humidifiers, but also as personal air conditioners. The principle, evaporative cooling. Same thing your body does when it sweats. Only here, the house is sweating for you. You look around the sardab you're in. The air is still. The only sound is the gentle gurgle of water. The walls here are 10 times more peaceful than the streets above. You realize that in a time before electric fans and boxed wine, this was peak luxury, and it wasn't just for the rich. Modest homes had smaller versions. Maybe just a clay pipe that fed cool Connaught air into one room. Maybe a wine jar buried in the earth beneath the floor. There were hacks and workarounds, but the idea was the same. If you lived in Persia and you wanted something cold, you didn't wait for nightfall, you built the system yourself. You moved back upstairs slowly, blinking against the brighter lamplight. As you rise, the air warms slightly, like stepping from a cellar into a summer evening. You notice your own breathing shift deeper, calmer. It's as if your body knows it's just had a historical spa treatment. You emerge back into the central courtyard where the badger still hums faintly. Someone hands you another cup this time. A thin, minty sherbet chilled in the sardab below. You take a sip. Refreshing. You wonder if any future historian sipping a supermarket smoothie will be half as impressed by our version of cool. Above you, the wind tower breathes in again, slow and steady. Beneath your feet, water glides through a channel older than most countries. You are, for the briefest moment, perfectly balanced air above, water below, wine in hand, and you didn't plug in a single thing. You're walking again slowly, because walking too fast in this dry heat is like challenging the sun to a duel, and as you pass through the maze of alleyways, you realize something odd. You haven't seen a single straight street in half an hour. Everything winds, everything twists, and every turn feels like someone planned it while drunk on saffron wine, but it's not a mistake. Not even close. This isn't just an ancient game of let's make every delivery person cry. It's a cooling tactic. The narrow, curving alleyways called kuches are part of the broader Persian climate control strategy. Streets that don't run in straight lines reduce direct sunlight exposure, increase shade coverage throughout the day, and help trap and funnel wind more effectively through the city. Yeah, even the roads are part of the AC. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Persian urban planners, especially in desert cities like Yazd, designed these winding alleyways to reduce heat, radiation, and enhance passive cooling. The taller walls on either side kept paths in near constant shadow, while curved layouts reduced wind resistance and helped guide breezes from the outskirts of the city toward its center. And these aren't just any breezes. These are carefully courted guests, funneled, angled, redirected by design. The city itself is a labyrinth with purpose. You turn a corner and walk into the Shaistana, a courtyard shared by several homes. The walls here are coated with thick adobe, sometimes reinforced with straw and egg whites. That's right, egg whites. Because when your house is a living, breathing thermal battery, you'll use whatever it takes. Smooth plasterwork reflects sunlight, and thick walls act as insulation, storing cooler night air to release during the scorching day, and you're not the only one enjoying the Shaistana. A group of women is sitting together in the shade, embroidering and quietly gossiping. A few children splash water from a shallow stone basin at the center, giggling. Even the animals know where to stand. Donkeys parked neatly against the coolest wall, tails flicking lazily. Someone offers you a slice of karboza sweet Persian noan, chilled from hours in a shaded cellar. You take a bite. It's crisp and cold, and the juice runs down your chin. In this heat, that counts as a religious experience. As you sit, licking your sticky fingers, you remember something strange you heard earlier. Some Persian homes had built-in ice pits. That can't be right. Ice here. Turns out, yes, cue the fringe fact of the night. Yakshils, which literally means ice pit, were massive. Ancient refrigeration systems used in Persia as early as 400 BCE, they looked like enormous beehive domes, often rising 20 feet or more above ground. But most of their bulk was actually below the surface. You picture one now, a clay dome with an underground storage chamber. insulated with a special mortar made from sand, ash, egg whites again, goat hair, and lime. The interior stayed incredibly cold enough to store ice gathered in winter, or even created using evaporative cooling techniques on frosty desert nights. Historians still argue whether yakshuls were purely winter tools, or if some ice was actually produced artificially by manipulating night temperatures. The physics checks out: slow evaporation and high altitude. Radiation can create ice in desert climates under the right conditions. But was that done regularly, or only by elite engineers with too much time and access to slaves? You glance at the nearest rooftop and imagine workers carefully dragging blocks of winter ice down into storage, wrapping them in straw, packing them between walls of shade and silence. It's like the world's slowest, most dangerous refrigerator delivery service. And what was that ice used for? Well, naturally, for storing perishables and chilling wine, of course. Because priorities dot as you return to the alleyways, the city around you hums in its low evening rhythm. Laughter rises from behind courtyards, smells of grilling lamb and saffron rice drift through wooden slats, and you see shadows playing on walls as lanterns flicker to life. Another wind tower looms above a nearby building, this one taller than the others with ornate woodwork around its fence. You realize each of these structures is slightly different. Some are square, some octagonal, some even paired like antennae. The variations aren't random. They're tailored to specific wind, patterns, building layouts, and even the status of the owner. Richer families often built multiple wind catchers, each oriented to a different seasonal wind. One fun detail: archaeologists have found homes with built-in dampers, basically ancient airflow control switches. You could block certain vents, redirect. Others want more breeze in the bedroom tonight. Slide the panel. Want less wind on the soup during dinner? Adjust the fan. Some badgers even connected directly to the abbey ambar or water cistern below. These domed structures stored clean drinking water, and the wind tower cooled the surface enough to slow down algae growth. The breeze didn't just keep people comfortable, it kept life livable. You wander further and come across an especially narrow passage. You have to turn sideways to squeeze through, and even in the near dark, you feel it, the breeze. Cool and dry, drifting lazily down the path. It curls around your neck, brushing aside the heat that clings like a second skin. You pause. Listen. There's a sound carried on the wind. A flute, maybe. Or someone tuning a santer, the Persian hammered dulcimer. Notes rising and falling like breath, echoing softly between stone and air. In that moment, the entire city feels like an instrument. The alleys are its strings, the wind towers its lungs, the qanats its heartbeat. And you're lucky just to be here, a wanderer in the middle of this ancient orchestra. You follow the music, barefoot now, and arrive at a rooftop gathering. Lanterns swing gently. The stars are enormous tonight. Someone hands you a bowl of faluda, the frozen rosewater noodle dessert of Persian dreams. How is it still cold? You don't even ask anymore. You just eat it slowly, trying not to look too smug. And all around you, badgers rise into the darkness like sleeping sentinels, watching, waiting, breathing. Word count 1097. Awaiting continue section 7. You wake again, or maybe you never really slept on the rooftop where faluda melted slowly beside you, forgotten in a shallow copper bowl. The stars are fading. The horizon turns from black to indigo. Morning in the desert is subtle at first, but soon enough, the heat will come galloping back like a vengeful horse. Time to move. You stretch, roll your shoulders, and take one last look at the skyline, a parade of wind catchers rising above homes, like periscopes from a sandy sea. Then you head down a tight staircase into the quiet corridors of the home beneath. The air is still cool, That's not luck, that's design. Let's talk about layout. Because Persian homes weren't just about being pretty, they were a thermal machine. Every room, every passageway, even the orientation of the courtyard had a job to do. Architects didn't guess, they aligned. They followed centuries of trial, tradition, and just a pinch of stubborn genius. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Persian architecture followed the principle of symmetry and solar orientation, the idea being that houses should open to the north or northeast, maximize exposure to winter sunlight, and minimize harsh summer rays. Add to that thick mud brick walls, small windows placed high up, and recessed doorways. And you've got a house that handles temperature like a seasoned butler. You walk past a central hall, talar with its high ceiling, wide, open archways, and a shaft of early light filtering through a colored glass panel. The breeze still drifts lazily through, cooled overnight by the wind catcher and the kanat-fed pool beneath the floor. The building hasn't woken up yet, but it's already smarter than most office complexes you've been in. Now let's take a turn into the panjari, the 5-door room. This is where the magic of symmetry really shows itself. Doors line one wall, opening onto the courtyard. The layout encouraged cross-ventilation, open just the right pair, and the wind slides through. Like a whispered conversation. It's the perfect spot for sleeping in summer or serving tea in winter, depending on which doors are open. Climate control, Persian edition. There's a quirky bit of trivia for you. Some old families gave their homes names based on how well their rooms managed airflow. A particular breezy house might be called the soft breathing one or whisper of the wind. Imagine that next time you name your Wi-Fi router. But don't forget, this wasn't all chill relaxation and poetic drafts. Life in the Persian desert meant constant vigilance against the heat. And there's a room that proves it, the Zana dot tucked behind the talar. The Zainane was the women's quarter of the house. Private, quiet, and most importantly cool. It was often placed on the shaded side of the home, with thick walls, fewer windows, and often its own miniature badger to ensure that the air didn't turn thick and stale during midday. Now, here's where the scholars start getting snippy. Historians still argue whether the Zenana's cooler temperatures were intentional climate design or just a side effect of social customs. Was this architectural sexism or smart thermodynamics? Nobody quite agrees. But what you do know, standing in its silent center, is that it's about 10 degrees more comfortable than the courtyard. You glance up. Another shaft pierces the ceiling, narrower than the main wind catcher, but just as effective. It drops cool air like a blessing. A jug of water sits beneath it, its surface barely rippling. The air around it feels like the inside of a well. And let's not forget the baruni, the guest reception room. This is where strangers came to sip tea, share gossip, and judge your interior design skills. Naturally, it had to stay cool and impressive. Wind catchers often fed directly into this room, guiding breezes over shallow fountains set in decorative floor channels. Some of these fountains had clever tricks, raised lips that directed water to flow in gentle spirals, or cut grooves that created burbling sounds. Not just aesthetic flair, but psychological cooling. The sound of moving water makes your brain think it's cooler. Those ancient Persians, they hacked your mind. You pause at a latticework screen mashrabiyah-style woodwork that throws speckled light across the tiles. It's not just beautiful. It diffuses sunlight, reducing glare and heat without blocking airflow. Again, nothing here is wasted. Nothing's by accident. Outside, the city begins to wake. Roosters crow, pots clink, and someone starts heating bread on a dome-shaped tannoor. The wind catchers pick up the faintest breeze and push it downward into sleeping rooms and to panjaris, across half-dressed children and stretching elders. No motors, no buzz. Just wind and gravity playing nice. You step back into the courtyard where a cat sprawls on cool tile, completely unbothered by the growing heat. A few steps away, a man waters a grapevine that's crept up the wall toward a bamboo trellis. The shade it throws is soft and shifting. Temporary architecture, there's another fringe gem for you. Some wealthier homes planted vines over their wind catchers, letting the leaves grow into a canopy. This helps shade the upper vents from direct sun, making the air inside even cooler. Basically, Persian air conditioning. With garnish dot, and now, finally, someone pours you a glass of fresh duga, salty yogurt drink served cold, sometimes with mint or cucumber. It's delicious and divisive. Half the population swears it's nectar from heaven. The other half thinks it tastes like gym towel water. Either way, it's cold, and it stays cold. Because again, the house wants it to. You sip as the city rises. Around you, birds flit between rooftops. Wind catchers creak faintly as air shifts. And you start to see this entire city not as a cluster of buildings, but as one living system designed to breathe, to adapt, to protect. A biome made of brick and breeze. You walk slowly now. You've learned to time your steps with the wind. It curls through doorways, snakes along the tile, and brushes your skin just when you need it to. And maybe, just maybe, you whisper thanks to the people who built this, the mathematicians with mud under their nails, the laborers who angled every stone, and the architects who believed that comfort could be engineered without a single bolt of electricity dot, and then the sun breaks over the wall, and the city breathes. You take cover, not dramatically. There's no explosion or surprise sandstorm, but because the sun has finally cleared the horizon, and suddenly the open courtyard feels like a frying pan left on high. Just like that, the temperature's climbed, shadows have retreated to the walls, and the cat has vanished, probably to some secret spot known only to desert felines, and architectural spirits dot, so you do what anyone who survived more than one Persian summer knows. You retreat inward. Literally, Persian homes were designed to fold in on themselves, like a flower closing in the heat. Their magic isn't in towering exteriors or street-facing bravado, but in what's hidden inside. And that principle? It's got a name. Introverted architecture. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Traditional Persian residential design embraced introversion, emphasizing privacy, protection from heat, and inward-facing layouts. Unlike many Western designs that project outward with porches and facades, Persian homes revolve around a central courtyard, often invisible from the street. And it's not just about modesty, though sure, modesty matters in a culture where privacy is prized. It's also about temperature control. A central courtyard acts as a microclimate, an enclosed zone where shade, water features, airflow, and foliage work together to cool the entire structure. You sit beneath a carved wooden awning and feel the proof. The shade is deep here, the kind that doesn't just block the sun, but soaks up the heat before it reaches you. The walls around you rise tall and thick, insulating like the world's most beautiful thermos. A pomegranate tree leans toward you, its leaves barely rustling in the gentlest wind. At your feet, a shallow house, a blue-tiled basin of water ripples, softly from the airflow engineered by the badger overhead. And yes, it's still working. Even now, with the sun beaming down, the air here feels manageable, cool, adjacent, not by miracle, but by centuries of collective architectural wisdom. Now, a quirky nugget for you. Some traditional Persian homes had secret doors that opened to hidden ventilation shafts, designed to draw hot air out like a chimney while channeling cooler air from shaded zones. These were usually controlled with simple wooden covers, giving homeowners full analog control of their microclimate. It's like HVAC with personality. You lean back and notice something about the walls. They're coated in lime plaster, smooth, and light-colored, which reflects rather than absorbs sunlight. This wasn't just aesthetic. It helped reduce the radiating heat from the walls themselves. In fact, some homeowners went a step further, mixing crushed seashells or marble dust into the plaster to increase reflectivity. And still, the debate stirs among scholars. Historians still argue whether these choices were deliberate scientific innovations or just traditional practices passed down with religious or ritual justifications. Did ancient builders understand the thermodynamics? Or were they following a rulebook written by trial and error, dressed in prayer? Honestly, does it matter? You're the one sitting here, comfortably sipping rosewater in a courtyard where it's somehow 25 degrees cooler than outside. Your host reappears, placing a plate of sliced cucumbers and fresh feta cheese on the stone ledge beside you. Simple fare, designed for the heat. You ask how the air stays so fresh without fans. He smiles and gestures upward. The tower drinks the wind, he says. You chew slowly, watching the breeze ripple the water's surface again. This phrase sticks with you. The tower drinks the wind. You think of all the other things drinking in this courtyard. The tree, the walls, the floor, even you. You get up and start pacing gently around the edge of the house. You notice little details now, tiny niches carved into the walls, each catching light in a different way. These were sometimes used for oil lamps, but they also helped soften echoes. Too much hard echo in a space like this made it feel like a furnace. A courtyard needed to feel quiet. Soft noise helps you forget how hot it is. And then there's the shade math. It's brilliant. Every element in this courtyard, from the placement of the walls, to the lean of the roof lines, to the thickness of each tile, has been calculated for one purpose: to manipulate time. When will this bench fall into shadow? When will that vine cast its longest arc across the path? You realize that Persian homes weren't just built to last. They were built to change by the hour. Another strange delight. Water clocks used in some wealthier homes in public baths. That's right time told by dripping water, a rhythm cool and constant, often paired with wind towers to create a hypnotic syncopation. You didn't just live in these homes, you sounded them out. Later, in the Anderuni, the women's private courtyard, you hear a soft whirring. A small boy turns a punka fan, a cloth sheet strung across a wooden frame, using a rope tied to a wall hook. Back and forth, back and forth. Manual labor. Sure, but honestly, it looks kind of peaceful. Like meditation, but with a breeze. And it's that breeze, small, regular, and gently guided, that makes the difference. The walls don't need to fight the heat, they redirect it. The floors don't chill by force. They absorb night cold and release it slowly, evenly, like breath. You begin to think of this house as a living thing, not a box for humans to live in, but a partner in the act of survival. The introversion of the home takes on deeper meaning now. It's not hiding from the world. It's pulling the world inward, reshaping. The wind, the water, the light, until all the harshness is folded into something soft, livable, even beautiful. You return to your earlier spot and find that the shade has shifted. Of course it has. Everything is on a schedule you're only now starting to perceive. You sit again and find a light blanket offered to you odd, perhaps, in this setting, but you take it. Wrap it around your shoulders, because somehow in this cool, shaded, introverted house in the middle of the desert, you're starting to feel just the tiniest bit cold. You're cold in the desert, not shivering, of course. Not frostbite on your nose cold, but definitely surprised. You rub your arms once, smile a little, and glance around like someone's about to yell, "Gotcha." But no prank is coming. It's just that the architecture has done its job too well. You're beneath a shadow-thick veranda. The courtyard pool is still radiating cool from its overnight chill. And above you, that ever-breathing badger is dragging down just enough breeze to give you GOOS spot in the middle of Persia at noon. And you think, how deep does this go? So you get up, once more drawn toward the belly of the house. Through another hallway, this one narrower with walls pressed tight like a canyon, and then you descend a short flight of steps. Not down to the sardab again, somewhere else. A space with a low ceiling, thick columns, and a quiet that feels intentional. You've entered the Abi Anbar, a traditional underground cistern, and maybe the coolest room in the house, literally. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Abi Anbars were essential elements of Persian urban planning, storing fresh water delivered by qanats and keeping it clean, cool, and accessible all year long. These structures were often shared by neighborhoods, with some large enough to serve hundreds of people. The water was accessed via stairs payups leading deep underground to shaded reservoirs sealed against light and dust. You walk those same stairs now, cool stone underfoot. The temperature drops noticeably with each step. Your ears start to pick up new sounds, the hollow quiet of a domed ceiling, the faint drip of condensation sliding down age-old plaster, and the ever-so-slight hum of wind passing overhead. Even here, the badgers are involved. Some Abi Anbars had wind towers installed directly above them, chilling the water below via convection. A pre-industrial refrigerator, hundreds of cubic meters big dot, and now, your fringe tidbit, some Abba Anbars used lime and crushed pomegranate rind as early forms of natural disinfectant. The combination helped keep the water from growing algae or bacteria. Imagine that. Ancient sanitation, achieved with a fruit most people today can't even open without. Making a crime scene out of their kitchen counter. You dip your fingers into the cistern's edge. The water is cold, shockingly so. You drink from a ceramic ladle hanging from a wooden hook. The taste is mineral rich, aged in clay, filtered by stone, cooled by air. It's like drinking from the lungs of the city itself. And while we're here, let's pause for the inevitable debate. Historians still argue whether these wind-assisted cisterns were accidental masterpieces, wind towers added after the cisterns existed, or whether the badgers and Abi Anbars were designed together as a symbiotic pair from the beginning. Some argue that cooling water was a side benefit of structures originally made for people. Others believe water was the priority and the cool rooms just got lucky. Either way, you're standing in one of the oldest examples of climate-adaptive architecture anywhere on Earth, and it smells ancient, not musty, just deep. Dust and clay, moisture, and time. You climb back up into the afternoon light and notice how still everything has become. The heat is at its peak. Streets have emptied. Dogs nap like puddles in the shade. Even the birds seem quieter. This is the Persian. Midday pause, a collective agreement to just stop. The city doesn't resist the heat, it works with it. Mornings are for chores, evenings are for laughter. The middle of the day is for silence, for shadow, for sipping something cold in a place that understands how heat behaves. And those places, they're everywhere if you know how to find them. Take the bazaar, for instance. You wander into one now, drawn by the smell of cardamom and dry fruit. It's massive, stretching like a vine beneath a roof of vaulted brickwork. High arched ceilings above you form natural chimneys. Light filters in through lattice vents, painting mosaics of shadow on the stone floor. These aren't just beautiful ceilings, they're functional. Hot air rises through them, escaping slowly while cooler air is drawn in from ground-level vents. The shops themselves are narrow and set deep into the walls. Their goods, textiles, spices, copperware stay cooler than you expect. It's as if the entire marketplace was designed to say, sure, we're in a furnace, but we're not going to sweat about it. Some stalls even keep their goods inside large clay jars half buried in the ground. You recognize these from earlier porous ceramic that breathes just enough to allow evaporation, chilling its contents by a few degrees. Cheese, olives, wine, all kept fresh because someone long ago figured out that clay sweats and that sweat cools. You pause at a tea vendor's stand, and he offers you a small brass cup. Cold infusion, he says. Barley and mint from the cistern, you drink it. It's refreshing. Not ice, but cool enough to calm your bones. You ask how it's kept that way. He shrugs and points upward. The tower, he says simply, and then gestures behind him, and the well. As you continue through the bazaar, you pass ice cream shops. Yes, real ice cream. The kind made from saffron, rosewater, and salep, stretched and pulled until it gains that chewy, elastic texture. Some keep their wares inside deep counters packed with salt and straw, another nod to pre-electric cooling methods that go all the way back to the actuals. You imagine generations of vendors tweaking their techniques, not based on tech upgrades, but on wind patterns and seasonal rhythms. You step back into the sunlight now, full and slightly drowsy. You think about your own life, your thermostats, your smart fridges, your obsession with climate-controlled storage. And yet, this ancient city, with its towers and tunnels, has matched all of it, quietly, elegantly, sustainably. You pause outside a bathhouse hammam, its domed roof, punctuated with glass openings. You consider stepping inside. Not for a bath, just to feel what centuries of evaporative cooling, thermal mass, and careful air circulation feel like when put together into a public masterpiece. But that'll come later. For now, you simply sit beneath a windcatcher's shadow. Close your eyes and feel its exhale steady, ancient, and wiser than any machine you know. The sun continues its relentless arc, but inside you're moving into something quieter, cooler, more thoughtful. You head toward the hammam, the traditional Persian bathhouse, a place that feels less like a spa and more like a climatic laboratory. Dressed in mosaic tiles and steam, HAMMs are far from just bathing spots. They're social hubs, sanctuaries, and crucially, feats of thermal engineering. In the middle of the desert, they had to manage extreme temperature swings, scorching days, chilly nights while maintaining comfort and cleanliness, the mainstream. Historical fact here, Persian hammams were typically designed with a sequence of rooms: the sarbayna, changing room, the garmkhana, hot room, and the kazana, steam room, all carefully arranged to control heat and humidity. Their ceilings were often domed with small glass openings, allowing natural light and ventilation to coexist. You step inside the sarbini, greeted by cool tiles underfoot and the gentle echo of dripping water. It's a space that invites relaxation, but also signals the start of a slow, ritualistic journey through heat and steam. The peculiar bet. Some hammams incorporated wind catchers directly into their ventilation systems. Badgers would draw in fresh air or expel humid, stale air, keeping the hot rooms from becoming suffocating. In some cases, the same wind that cooled the wine or home would be routed to the bathhouse, creating a network of climatic symbiosis. You notice that the dome ceiling above is dotted with glass bubbles called oculi, which not only filter sunlight but also help regulate temperature. They trap hot air, letting it rise and vent naturally, much like a giant architectural chimney. Historians still argue whether the domed ceilings were primarily aesthetic or strictly functional. Some believe the ornate designs were meant to symbolize the heavens, while others think they optimized air circulation and moisture control. Maybe it was a bit of both, the perfect blend of science and art. You move through the warm chambers, feeling the temperature rise gradually, the steam thickening but never overwhelming. The walls, made of thick adobe bricks, Soak up the heat slowly, releasing it evenly to avoid sudden spikes. It's an ancient form of thermal inertia, a concept you probably thought was modern engineering jargon. Outside the hot rooms you find the cooling courtyard, an open-air space that bathers would retreat to, shaded by trees and sprinkled with water features. It's a sensory relief after the heat, a place to socialize, sip cool drinks, or simply breathe. And yes, the courtyard's air feels familiar, softly scented with jasmine, carrying a gentle breeze channeled by nearby wind catchers. You realize the hammam isn't isolated. It's woven into the fabric of the city's cooling system. Here's another fringe fact. Some hammams use natural salts on their walls to absorb moisture and prevent mold growth, acting as primitive dehumidifiers. The salt also helped keep the air feeling fresh, adding an invisible layer of comfort. As you sit in the courtyard, your mind drifts to the soundscape, the distant call of merchants, the soft chatter of bathers, the faint splash of water. These elements weren't accidental background noise. They were carefully cultivated to create a sense of calm, making the intense heat easier to bear. You think about the contrast outside. The city bakes under the sun, but inside these walls, centuries of knowledge trap coolness, movement, and life. It's a dance between heat and water, stone and wind. You'll hear stories about how the hammam was also a political space, a place for gossip, deal-making, and social bonding. But for now, you're focused on the sensory experience. The chill of the marble, the warmth of the steam, the whisper of the wind. In that moment, you understand that Persian climate architecture wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving in an environment that demanded respect and ingenuity. The city, the homes, the baths, they weren't just buildings, but ecosystems, carefully balanced and constantly adapting. You rise from the marble bench, feeling the contrast between cool skin and warm air. Outside, the sun has shifted, shadows lengthening. The day will cool soon, and with it, the whole city will come alive again. But until then, you savor the quiet magic of this ancient bathhouse, a place where heat and coolness meet in perfect harmony, shaped by hands long gone, but minds still very much present. The sun dips lower now, and you find yourself wandering toward the grand bazaars again. But this time you seek something different, an experience less about commerce and more about the subtle art of keeping cool when the day still burns hot. You stroll through winding alleys, shaded by fabric awnings and wooden lattice that filter the sun's rays into soft patterns on the ground. The air feels cooler here, not just because of shade, but because of an invisible network of air currents working behind the scenes. At the heart of the market, you encounter another remarkable Persian invention. The salsabil, a small, cleverly designed water fountain that not only pleases the eye, but also cools the air through evaporation. The fountain's shallow pools are set at different levels, allowing water to cascade gently from one to the next, maximizing surface area and the cooling effect. The mainstream historical fact: Persian gardens and marketplaces often included water features specifically for this evaporative cooling. These were early examples of passive climate control, ingeniously using the desert's scarce water to temper the air. But here's the quirky tidbit: some salsabils were equipped with tiny, hidden air channels beneath their pools that directed cool air into surrounding shops and homes. It was like an ancient version of a central air system, but made from stone, water, and wind. You pause to sip a cold sherbet, a traditional fruit-flavored syrup diluted with water, known for its refreshing qualities in the heat. The vendor smiles and points upward toward the wind towers lining the rooftops, explaining how the breeze caught there is funneled down through these water features to amplify the coolness. Historians still argue whether the salsabil's main purpose was purely practical or if it also served symbolic functions representing purity and paradise, essential themes in Persian culture. Maybe it's a bit of both. just like the wind towers that are equally functional and emblematic. As you move on, you notice that many merchants keep their goods inside thick clay pots or beneath damp cloths, methods that enhance the cooling effect through evaporation, similar to the way AB bars preserve water. You realize how intertwined all these techniques are, each a piece of a larger system working in harmony. The deeper you go into the maze of shops, the more you appreciate the balance between built form and natural forces. Every architectural detail, from lattice windows to vaulted ceilings, contributes to controlling heat and airflow. You think about how modern cities often ignore these lessons, relying instead on energy-hungry machines to fight the climate. Here, centuries ago, entire communities thrived by embracing nature's rhythms, bending them without breaking them. The sky now fades into soft hues of orange and purple, and as evening approaches, the heat begins to ease. You step outside, feeling the gentle night breeze, a final reminder of how the ancient Persians mastered the desert's challenges. You carry these quiet wonders with you, the fountains, the wind towers, the scented courtyards, knowing that, while technology has marched on, these time-tested methods still whisper secrets about how humans can live lightly and well in harsh environments. Word count 1088. Awaiting continue. Section 12 night fully settles now, and you find yourself wandering toward the city's outskirts, where the famous yakshuls stand like ancient ice factories, silhouetted against a star-pocked sky. You might remember these from earlier, but now you get to see them in action. Yakshuls were huge, cone-shaped mud brick structures used to store ice and food throughout the era. Must have in a land where summer temperatures soar. Here's your mainstream historical fact: yakshuls could store ice harvested from nearby mountains or created during winter nights through a process called radiative cooling, where water left in shallow pools froze under the cold desert sky. Even when daytime temperatures were above 30 degrees Celsius, the ice was then kept cool underground in the yakshul's insulated dome, often for months. The quirky detail: these ice houses had wind catchers built directly into their structure to funnel chilly night air into the storage chambers, enhancing the freezing process. It's like the badger's cooler cousin, specifically tailored to create and preserve ice before electricity was a twinkle in anyone's eye. Historians still argue whether the ice was mostly for royal consumption or if ordinary people had regular access to it. Some suggest that ice was a luxury reserved for the elite, while others point to records of markets selling ice to common folk during hot seasons. You walk around the base of the yakshul, feeling the thick mud walls, layers of special clay and straw that keep the heat out in the cold in. You peer into the small openings, imagining the workers of old, carefully stacking ice blocks inside, then covering them with straw and sand for insulation. At night, the surrounding pools glisten faintly under the moonlight, reflecting the stars. These pools played a dual role, harvesting ice and cooling the air around the yakshul through evaporation. You think about the patience it took waiting for the night to cool water to freezing, then storing that ice safely for summer months. No rush, no instant gratification, just slow, deliberate mastery over nature's cycles. Nearby, you spot a small family gathering around a low table, sharing a simple meal with fruit chilled from the yakshul's ice. They laugh and sip on cool drinks, oblivious to the thousands of years of engineering marvel that keep their food fresh and their drinks icy. You consider how this tradition ties into the larger story of Persian climate control, the way architecture, water management, and nature worked in tandem to sustain life and comfort in an unforgiving environment. As you turn to leave, the yakshul stands majestic and silent, a monument to ancient ingenuity and patience. As the cool night deepens, you drift toward a quiet corner of the city where an ancient canal system whispers beneath your feet. These underground aqueducts are the lifeblood of Persian civilization, quietly transporting precious water from distant mountain springs to thirsty towns and farms below. The mainstream historical fact. Canals consist of gently sloping tunnels, dug by hand, sometimes stretching for miles, designed to channel groundwater without evaporation, a vital innovation for desert survival. They allowed settlements to flourish where surface water was scarce, enabling irrigation, drinking supplies, and even cooling systems. Now here's a quirky bit. Some canal systems were ingeniously integrated with residential and commercial architecture, directing cool water through channels inside homes and bazaars, helping regulate indoor temperatures. The water's movement cooled the air around it, creating microclimates long before air conditioning was even dreamed of. Historians still argue how widely accessible canal water really was. While it's clear these systems were marvels of engineering, some evidence suggests that access could be limited by social class or land ownership, creating tensions between users. You step carefully over the small ventilation shafts that the cityscape slim wells rising from the canal tunnels below, allowing air exchange and maintenance access. The shafts also help create a natural airflow, pulling cool, moist air into nearby buildings. Walking along a narrow alley, you notice how many houses have water channels running beneath or beside them, trickling gently over smooth stones. The sound is soft, almost hypnotic, like a lullaby whispered by the earth itself. These water channels aren't just practical, they're aesthetic too. Persian architecture loves to blend function with beauty, and the canal-fed water features add shimmering reflections, fragrant plantings, and a calming presence. You think back to the wind catchers and the actuals, now seeing them as parts of an interconnected system: air, water, earth, and architecture all working together in harmony. Your mind wanders to the many hands that dug these canals, the careful maintenance, and the communal management. Building and sustaining a canal was a collective effort, often governed by local water laws known as canal rights. At times, disputes flared over water shares, but canals also fostered community bonds. Everyone depended on the same lifeline. Everyone had to cooperate to keep it flowing. You pause by a small pool, where fresh water from the canal cools before flowing on. The coolness against the desert's residual heat is a quiet reminder of human ingenuity and cooperation. As you look up, the night sky is still vast and clear. Below, beneath the city, the canals continue their slow, steady work, quietly sustaining life in one of the world's harshest climates. It's humbling to think that these invisible arteries, dug by ancient hands, still pulse with the same purpose today. The night grows deeper, and you find yourself drawn to the quieter edges of the city, where humble adobe homes hug the earth, their flat roofs pierced by slender wind towers reaching toward the stars. These are the residential badgers, the everyday heroes of Persian cooling architecture. Unlike the grand, ornate towers topping palaces or public buildings, these smaller versions are no less clever, quietly channeling cool breezes into homes. Even in the harshest heat. The mainstream historical fact: wind catchers have been used across Persia for over 1,000 years, a testament to their enduring utility. By catching prevailing winds and funneling them down into living spaces, they dramatically lowered indoor temperatures, often by several degrees, a literal lifesaver in the desert. The quirky bit: some badgers had adjustable internal vents, allowing residents to control airflow direction and volume, almost like ancient air conditioners with a dial. Some even had water basins at the base to cool incoming air further through evaporation, a neat trick to maximize comfort. Historians still argue the origins of windcatcher design. Some suggest it was inspired by natural termite mounds that regulate internal temperature, while others believe it evolved purely from human trial and error. Either way, It's an impressive example of biomimicry or practical genius. You step inside one of these homes and immediately notice the difference. The air feels fresh, cool, and alive, moving gently but persistently through the space. The walls, thick and made from mud bricks, store the coolness and release it slowly. Smoothing out temperature fluctuations. The house is arranged around a central courtyard, shaded by a fig tree whose leaves rustle softly in the breeze. A small fountain trickles in the corner, adding to the sense of coolness and tranquility. You imagine families here, living with the rhythms of the wind and water, adapting their daily routines to the sun's movements and the badger's whispers. It's a lifestyle of attunement to nature rather than resistance, an ancient dance between human comfort and environmental limits. Outside, the wind towers stand silhouetted against the moon, slender sentinels of cool air and quiet innovation. You recall the hammams, domed ceilings, the yakshal's frozen stores, and the kanat's hidden veins, all part of this intricate system of adaptation. As you prepare to leave this quiet home, you feel a deep appreciation for the ingenuity embedded in seemingly simple designs. It's a reminder that sometimes the best solutions come from paying close attention to the world around you. You step back into the night, carrying with you the cool breath of the windcatchers, a silent gift from a time when architecture and nature spoke the same language. The night begins to fade, and you find yourself on the rooftop of one last building, gazing out over the sleeping city, a labyrinth of adobe walls, domes, and slender wind towers standing silhouetted against a pale horizon. You're struck by how everything feels connected: the homes, the baths, the gardens, the kanats, the yakchals, all parts of a vast living system designed not only to survive, but to thrive in the desert. The mainstream historical fact: Persian architects and engineers mastered the delicate balance between climate, culture, and comfort, creating spaces that responded organically to the harsh environment rather than fighting against it. Here's a quirky tidbit to drift off with. Some ancient texts suggest that certain windcatchers were considered sacred, believed to carry prayers, or even the breath of spirits, proof that in Persian culture, technology and spirituality often blended seamlessly. Historians still debate the extent to which these cooling technologies spread beyond Persia and influenced later Islamic and Mediterranean architecture. While there's clear evidence of cultural exchange, pinpointing direct lineage is tricky perhaps. The ideas traveled more like whispers on the wind than grand blueprints. As the first hints of dawn touch the rooftops, you feel a sense of calm wash over you. The city will soon stir again under the relentless sun, but for now it rests, held in a delicate balance of shadow, air, and water. You reflect on the journey, how these ancient cooling methods relied on patient observation, communal effort, and an unyielding respect for the natural world. They remind you that sometimes the coolest solutions aren't about modern gadgets or flashy tech, but about understanding your environment deeply and working with it, not against it. Now, as the city wakes, you take a slow breath and let the cool morning air fill your lungs, carrying with it the timeless wisdom of a people who found peace in the desert's embrace. As you settle in to rest, imagine the gentle whisper of wind moving through those ancient towers, the soft trickle of water in a courtyard fountain, the cool marble beneath your fingers in a quiet bathhouse. These sensations fade slowly, like a lullaby woven from stone, air, and water. Breathe deeply. Let the desert's calmness and the ingenuity of centuries cradle your thoughts. Feel the rhythm of a world where architecture breathes alongside nature. Soon, your own breath will slow, your mind will quiet, and sleep will take you softly, surely, like a cool breeze on a warm night. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.
you.